Hello, everyone. In this week, we'll be talking about religion and politics. So religion and politics is relatively a newer topic in the study of comparative politics, in the subfield of comparative politics. The reason is that when the subfield of comparative politics first emerged in the aftermath of the Second World War, scholars mostly focused on measurable variables. And at that time, surveys, quantitative methods were the most dominant methods in the field. Religion was somehow overlooked. People had difficulty in measuring the impact of religion. That was one reason. But also another reason was the dominant theory of secularization at the time. Many scholars of social theory, sociologists and political scientists, believe that religion became obsolete. Religion was irrelevant in the study of social and political outcomes. This was mostly tied to secularization thesis, which is a different variant of modernization theory, which we covered in the past in this semester. According to the secularization thesis, the scholars argued that with the rise of modern society, with modernization, religion lost its impact in three main fields. One is the state, in the statehood, in the governance. Religion became a less relevant factor. So scholars thought religion is becoming more private thing, not relevant in public policy making. And probably they were also right on many cases. So because that was the trend of the time. In the second area that religion reduced its impact was religiosity. People were less religious than they were before, according to these scholars. So religion was also becoming a less relevant factor in the private lives of the people. And the third one is what they called privatization. So even for those who took religion more seriously, they took it in their private lives and they separated it from the public life mostly. So it became a private issue. So its relevance on politics, which is a public topic most of the time, right? Because when we are studying politics, we are studying state's relationship with the people, it's really, really public. So because of this trend, they argued that religion is not a significant variable that needed to be taken into consideration in studying politics. However, this trend changed recently. Obviously, religion became an important force, especially after 1979 of Iranian Revolution. But not only in Europe, but in many Western European countries, religious movements gained more ground. In the United States, for example, religion has become an important social force. Starting from 1980s, and it became even more important in 1990s, and today it is a very relevant public policy factor to consider the recent abortion debate and the impact of religious organizations in coming to this point. So not only in the third world countries, but in the Western Europe, not European, in many European countries, probably secularization is still relevant. Religion is not an important factor. However, the rise of Muslim minorities in Europe, in France, in Britain, in many other European countries, made it still relevant. In an indirect way, it is still relevant. But in Europe, maybe other than Europe, almost everywhere in the world, religion resurged again, and it became an important field in the subfield of comparative politics. So what do scholars of religious politics work? First of all, they work on the relevance, the resurgence of religion, why it happened, why did religion become an important area of field recently. And second, the different types of religious institutions or religion state institutions and its impact on state relationship with different religious groups. This is especially relevant in understanding, let's say, there have been lots of studies that compare French and US cases. because French and US secular, they are both secular countries, but the way that they understand secularism is different, as you will analyze more in this week's discussion. In the United States, secularism is mostly separation of state and religion. In France, it is still considered separation, but French people consider it part of their own identity as well. And also in France, separation is understood differently. While French people are proud to be more secular than many other people around the world, while this is so, when you go to France, you will see that French state actually supports Catholic schools. Most of them, 90% of the funding of religious schools in France are actually through the state money, through the tax money. So they have their own particularities toward religion. But mostly what scholars compare US and France is mostly how secularism is part of French national identity, but it's more of a legal separator in the US. Even though in the recent years, with the resurgence of secularism and the backlash against, with the resurgence of religion and a backlash against religion, we have seen a more identity-based secularism rising in the United States, like culture wars, different types of, some people are reacting against the resurgence of religion and they are developing a more secular identity. Or you can also say the reverse. Some secular identities might have also created a religious backlash. It's complicated. But in general, the French approach towards religion is more skeptical than it is in the United States. Or another case is Turkey, which looks similar to the French case, but it has had different transformations recently. But it is one of the popular cases to compare with French and US cases. Another really popular case is India, because India also defines itself as a secular state, but recently, especially with the rise of Hindu nationalism, Indian secularism is under threat. But even before, but in general, when India became independent from the United Kingdom in 1947, Indian secularism was more embracive. Even though the country was secular, the country allowed Muslim minority to implement its own religious law, which is really controversial. Even some Muslims were against this move, especially women's rights activists, for example. So the comparison of different state religion institutions is a very popular topic. And in the book that you're writing, which is written by a fabulous author, alien citizens, of course, you got what I mean. In the book, again, I built on that tradition. I still compare French and Turkish institutions of state religion relations and its impact on regulation or its impact on state policies toward religious minorities. But I build another layer into that and look at how international context actually shifts the domestic balance of power and makes some of the policies possible even when domestic institutional arrangements are against it. So that's a very popular study of state religion relations or religion and politics issue in comparative politics, the comparative institutional structures and its impact on different policies. Another area recently has been the impact of religion in the public sphere. Different countries, again, depending on their institutional context, reacted to the role of religion in public sphere. French reaction to the role of religion in the public sphere has been severe, much more severe than it is here in the US, for example. And as you read in my Alien Citizens book, the French state has limited the religious manifestation, the public manifestation of religious symbols. The policies that are not even thinkable in the US actually became real policies in France, for example. So the role of religion in the public sphere has become another important topic. Of course, theories of religion, the extent of secularization thesis, how it transformed, different types of secularization thesis. These are all important and relevant topics. Another recent topic has been religion and democratization. In some places like Latin America, some religious groups have become very influential in actually promoting democratic transitions in the past. But in other contexts, they were obstacles to democratic transitions. And in some contexts, like European countries, especially the Catholic countries, while the Catholic Church initially didn't have friendly relationship with the democratic processes, in the later periods, it actually made peace with democratic processes. And this changing relationship of religion with democracy was another type of topic that has been studied by comparativist scholars. So as I mentioned before, in these sample topics, we are giving a taste of different types of topics, and I want you to analyze these topics from the theoretical perspectives that we covered in the first part of the class. So I hope you can implement it. But religion and politics is relatively a newer area of study in comparative politics for the reasons that I have already mentioned. If you guys are interested in furthering your scholarship in comparative politics, this can be a good field, I think, that you can build more on. There is still a lot to be done in this genre, especially the comparative work. Many scholars in the US worked on the US for understandable reasons, and many scholars worked on the popular cases that I have already mentioned, but many cases across the globe are still needs to be taken into consideration. Of course, one other area of study is religious, like theocracies, like Saudi Arabia and Iran, and how religion became an important part of their political processes is another question that some scholars have also worked on, especially in the Middle East scholars working on the Middle East region. But thinking of the Middle East, many scholars think that religion is more relevant in some parts of the world, including the Middle East, and primarily the Middle East for many people. But the recent resurgence of religion made it relevant in almost all the contexts, maybe except Europe. And if we include the Muslim minority in Europe and the relevance of the resurgence of religion through these minorities, even Europe can be included in the study of religious resurgence.